Now, I'm going to tell you one other story that puts this in focus because it happened on a hill. Happened here last summer. Jim Hilliard's already said what I would say about Lauren Young, so just in your mind, ditto that. I love him very dearly. And that's mutual. He loves me very dearly. We've been deep and warm friends, and we share stories with each other. I think Lauren is the supreme storyteller. I just sit there pounding pulse and my heart throbs. Last night, I don't know about you, but I was sitting there wiping them off when we got through, man. I do it every time. He can get up here and read the orders of the day, and I just say, wasn't that beautiful? He can just say, you will wear your name tags. And I say, how does he find the words? Where does he do that? Well, we were sitting over here in front of the fireplace in Lee Hall. It was one of those beautiful nights last summer when it was kind of crisp. It was sweater weather and long pants weather. And we were just sitting up here enjoying the cool company as we do so often late at night after y'all have to go to bed. And there in front of the fireplace, everybody had kind of dwindled off. And Lauren and I somehow managed to get our rockers close to each other after midnight. We were sitting there in unison, just rocking. And he said, hey, Grady, I got to tell you a story the other day. See if you think there's anything in it. For him to ask me if there's anything in the story is a thrill. And he told me about being over at Duke University last spring. And he was in the dormitory, visiting there for some reason to speak on the campus, and they've got him in a guest room up on the 3rd floor. Duke University was built back when they thought universities ought to be like cathedrals. And so they got big, tall, skinny windows and Gothic architecture. It's just gorgeous. But these windows in the dorm about that wide. You got to turn sideways to look out of them, you know. Tall, thin windows. Got a little laboratory here up in the John. They got the windows up on either side to let April in. And so he's standing there, you know, kind of towel around him, looking into the mirror, shaving. Now, he turns his face to the right to shave the left side, and all of us fellas who shave know that when you do this, because of your nose, you lose the use of your right eye when you're shaving the left side of your face. That's why you hold your head over here. Your head keeps saying, no. So you lock it in place and you cut that side down to shave. He kicked his face over, wrenched off, and started on his face, and his eye is attracted out the open window to some motion. So he looks and refocuses. There in the distance, he sees in the top of a 2.5 floor oak a squirrel up in the little teeny branches doing his morning thing. Squirrel just sort of get out there and sprung. Squirrels drive me crazy. As beautifully coordinated as I am, I have trouble with things like somersaults and trampolines. This squirrel just hangs on here and there. And the one that drives you wild is when he grabs on by his back little toe and just sort of goes, you know. And this squirrel is just leaping and spronging. And Lauren said, I'm sitting there just saying, go squirrel, hit it, you know, woo. And he rinsed off and started back before he dried out. And just as he got to the face and started to look away, he saw something he'd never seen before. Now, I'm a nut and I watch squirrels. And I've never seen this before. He saw a squirrel miss. How many of you ever saw a squirrel miss? Shut up. In this size group, somebody's always seen a squirrel miss. I don't know why that is. He said this squirrel leaped out, and you couldn't criticize his grip. I mean, if you'd been sitting there with a scorecard checking grips, you'd have said, that's an A grip. Good. Super grip. Go squirrel! And he leaped out, and he sprung, hung on, you know, muscles flexed just right the way he'd been coached by the chief squirrel how to grip. It was the leaf that turned loose. You cannot be blamed when the barbell breaks, right? I mean, so what? The leaf turned loose, and for 2.5 floors, that squirrel goes down like the Statue of Liberty. And just drives his ankles right up in his hip sockets, you know. Schwonks into the ground and then boom, lies there. I don't blame him. And the squirrel's lying out there on his side just like you hit him with hairspray, man. He just... There he lieth. Behold. And Lauren, if you know Lauren very well, you know that he'd be concerned about a wounded squirrel. You know. don't care about people, but he hurts for wounded squirrel. And Lauren said, I was looking out the window and I'm thinking to myself, everything in me is saying, And he said, I looked and I watched and I'm sort of saying in my deepest heart, come on, squirrel, you can do it. Come on. Here, squirrel, up, up. And the squirrel just... And he said, finally, I decided I ought to try to run down and help him. Maybe a passing cat would get him, or a passing student would go and get him. And so he said, I grabbed from a terry cloth robe. Wouldn't do to go out looking like that and say you was tending to a wounded squirrel. I mean, who's going to believe that? So he wraps his robe, slams his feet in his wooden-soled shower shoes, and starts out the door in a mad dash and halts in mid-dash. Because just as he tore out the door, he looked down and he saw the squirrel's tail go. So he said, I just paused. And I said, go. Squirrel go again. So Lauren said, I leaned out the window and I'm looking at you. Come on. Squirrel flinched one shoulder, And then he rolled his neck. And then he opened one eye. I wanted Bunny to see that. Opened one eye. And then he stared at his leaf. And then he looks up at that tree. In his heart, he says, I can't believe I missed the whole thing. And then he said the squirrel rolled over on his all fours, weaved and staggered around for a moment, just like he'd been hit by a blindside oak block, And he kept saying in his deepest heart, now, tree, if you'll stand still, I can get back to you. And he began a little wobbledy serpentine path, and he starts toward the tree. And he gets to the base of it and takes a deep breath. And then he rams those cleats home like a telephone pole climber. You just stand still, oak. Here I come. Hind feet. And up the tree. You kick a mic, it'll talk back to you. Sorry about that. And he just goes right on up the tree. All the way up past the fat side limbs. To the medium-sized side limbs. To the little side limbs. To the little dinky side limbs, and goes out the smallest one of those, far as he can get, sprongs out as far as he can reach, grabs one little teeny limb by his hind little toe, and he looks at the tree and goes, And Lauren said, I stood there and I looked at that squirrel. He didn't tell it quite like this. But he said, I looked at that squirrel spronging around in the little teeny weeny branches, and I said to myself, isn't it beautiful? Nobody stomped him while he was down. And he asked me if there was anything in that story. Just the gospel, that's all. I think of all the things I'd like to have said about me as a Christian is I refused to stomp them when they were down. Last thing a man needs when he's really boo-booed with his life is to be told that he's boo-booed with his life. He needs to be lifted up.